And we're really excited to have another guest with us today, Vanessa Dyer, a registered dietitian who took a special interest in perimenopause and menopause. And when she and I were talking, she was saying that trauma has an impact on menopause, and that, of course, intrigued me. So we brought her on, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say today. So excited to be here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure where we should begin because first of all, let me just say I used the word premenopause, and Vanessa was like, yeah, that's not a thing.
It's okay.
I
Everyone
didn't
else
know
does.
that wasn't a thing. Until literally you're saying right now, I was like, it's not a thing.
Apparently not.
It is. It's just so premenopause is when a girl gets her first period because that kind of initiates the hormones being like the reproductive hormones. And so a lot of women say, "Oh, I'm premenopausal," but they mean perimenopausal. So a
Oh,
lot of people say it. I said it at one point. It's okay. Everyone says it at one point. I feel I'm not really sure. Like I even tried Googling like how that how people confused that. I think it's just one of those things that just happens. I don't know.
It's just the R. It just got us.
yeah. It kind of makes sense because when you think pre, you think right before. So you
Right.
don't think, you don't think pre 15-year-old, like 45 years before. But you think right before. So that's what my thought process was when I that.
Right.
And I'm also curious, like, how is it linked to trauma? Like, does it bring back trauma from 15-year-old trauma, like childhood trauma, or is it recent trauma, or so many questions?
So the best way, like I was actually kind of all day trying to think about analogies to like
Oh,
try
nice.
to relay it to people. So the way I explain how hormones in general affect our body is I tell people to think of it like our body armor. So hormones are our body armor. And when hormones shift, that makes our body armor weak and vulnerable. So anything can happen. Anything can happen. Our skin, we can have skin changes, we can have digestion changes. So like when I say skin changes, I'm talking about oily skin, dry skin, acne, rashes. Some women lose their hair. Some women get dry eyes. Some women even get nosebleeds. Some women get bloating. Some women get gas. Most women do gain weight. So they usually associate hormonal changes with weight gain. And then most also get either night sweats or hot flashes. But it also affects our bone calcium, also our insulin levels, and also our triglyceride and cholesterol levels. So those are also really important to think about. But something that I emphasize a lot on, especially on my Instagram, is protecting our brain because a lot of people don't understand that the brain is pretty much our control center, right? And so it handles our emotions, it handles our memory, but it also directly controls our digestive system. So I try to explain to people like when their hormones are changing the brain, that can cause the changes in serotonin, which is involved with our digestion, and it also affects the way that we sleep. So with the brain, I try to explain it kind of like a spider web. So if you think like of a spider web, there's so many different parts going on. And so one of the things that are affected is the amygdala, the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex. And so the amygdala is involved with processing emotions, typically fear and anxiety. So what happens is women who either have PTSD or who have experienced childhood trauma, their amygdala is going to already be affected to begin with. So then when hormones shift, and that's also the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, which I'll go into a little bit. So when hormones shift and that body armor weakens, it's kind of like extra daggers in our brain. So women will experience their anxiety like 10 times more. That's just, I'm just throwing an example out there. So they'll feel more anxious. Their PTSD symptoms can feel worse. So that's why I try to emphasize, like, how are you protecting your brain? What are you doing for your brain? And nutrition plays a huge role with that. I mean, it's not the only thing that's going to help. So that's why I try to emphasize, like, I try to connect with a lot of therapists as well, because you, it, what you guys do is, important.
I was just thinking, like, damn, we should make a list of all the things we have to look forward to.
Well, the reason I made my business is like, it's my business slogan is menopause prep. Are you ready for menopause? Like, are you ready? Is your body ready for the changes? And there's so many people out there that can help women going through hormonal changes. Like, we don't have to suffer and just deal with it like what we've been told and what we've heard over the course of years. My mom had a full hysterectomy and full removal of both her ovaries in her 30s, and she went through hell. What was that?
I said 30s. That's a very young age to have that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how old she, but I know she was in her 30s because I remember I was kind of young. But I mean, that's immediate menopause. That's called surgical menopause, and there's no care for that, and there's no care for women going through perimenopause or menopause. And I mean, it's being I think it's being talked about a lot more because celebrities like Halle Berry and what's that girl's name? Um, oh my God, I can't think of Drew Barrymore
Mm.
is talking about it a lot more. And so, people love celebrities. So they're like, oh, this. But I'm glad that they are, because we're just told to just deal with it, that's just part of being a woman. And I was told that with my own health issues when I was 17. I had a lot of health issues when I was 17. And but I even worked with pregnant women for several years, and the things that they told me that their doctors told to them, I'm just like, yo, that's not okay. Like, that is not okay. But so the hippocampus is the part of our brain that stores memory, and it's involved with, like, I think of it like a memory bank. So it creates memories, and it also is responsible for storing memory. So again, like, if that's already altered to begin with, um when women go through hormonal changes, it could be a lot worse, because my memory is already bad because of trauma. Because I learned years ago trauma affects memory, and I'm like, man, that makes so much sense how that happens. And so I'm already like, okay, why am I in this room? What am I doing here? Wasn't I just doing this? Wasn't I just doing that? So because a lot of women can experience memory issues, like they feel like they're going crazy, and they might feel like they have a hard time collecting their words and creating sentences. And so that's another symptom. And then the prefrontal cortex is involved with decision making, also emotional regulation. And so that's also affected from anxiety and trauma, like PTSD to begin with. So when that's affected by hormones, again, it could be a lot worse. And we might feel really sad, and then we might get really angry, or we might feel really lonely, although we might have a huge support system. Um, and then it's like we might have a hard time trying to figure out what we want to do. So, like, decision making. So the brain is like hugely affected by hormonal changes. And I try to do a lot of education just to make women aware of what changes are going on in their body, because a lot of them don't know, and it's not their fault at all, because we don't, if no one, like, I just love reading. I love researching. My best friends, like, I don't know how you spend time and hours doing that. I greatly enjoy doing that. But not everyone is like me. Not everyone's like a nerd and just wants to like research stuff about their body, you know? So, I just always been like that since I was 3. And unless you don't learn things from other people or from your doctor or in school, how else are we really supposed to know
First of
about
all,
our
did you
body?
just say that you've been reading since you were 3?
Yeah, I'm hyperlexic.
Wow.
No, yeah, I didn't know that wasn't normal. My boyfriend pointed that out because I know. So that I literally just learned that like last year that it wasn't normal to read at 3 because I remember reading before kindergarten and I even confirmed it with my mom that I was reading before kindergarten. She's like, "Yeah, you were reading at 3 years old and you like taught yourself how to read." And so my boyfriend is dyslexic, okay? And so he told me I was hyperlexic. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because he was telling me how his friend was reading to his daughter. I'm like, isn't his daughter like in first grade or like, and he's like, Vanessa, average age to start reading is like 6 to 8. And I Googled it. I'm like, what? I was like, wait, I like blew my mind. But it would make so much sense because before I became an entrepreneur, I would read about 3 books a week, romance books a week. Um,
Still,
so like about 30 to 330 pages. Like I can read a book in a day. Now it takes me several weeks because I'm doing other things. And even like, let's say my mom and I were sitting down and I would be flicking through Netflix. I'll just go do do do. She's like, "Wait, I can't read the titles. What are you doing? Like you're going
oh,
so fast." I'm like, "What do you mean? Like you can't read the title?"
like I read
So it's
everything
Wow.
here.
yeah, it's sort of like do do do. So yeah, so I think I'm just a reader and I've just always been interested in books. And just I'm able to read something that I have interest in, like nutrition and physiology, not anything else really. I don't really care about anything else, to be honest, and retain that information.
Wow.
So,
That's
Wow.
awesome. Okay, so when does perimenopause start? Because that was something that surprised me. We
mhm,
know menopause is usually later in life, late
mhm.
40s, early 50s, but what about perimenopause?
So the average age for peri to start is in a woman's 40s, but it can start as young as 30s. So my friend is 37 and she's been experiencing very low energy, low motivation, and she's getting night sweats and she's not on birth control. Because the
Mm.
reason why I had night sweats when I was 17 is because I was on birth control. Also, I was in a very toxic environment. So my cortisol levels were very high because my hair fell out when I was like my hair would shed a lot when I was 17. I couldn't keep weight on and I would have horrific night sweats.
Hmm. That was from your birth control?
It was from a combination of birth control and my cortisol levels being really high because cortisol is a symptom amplifier. So it's not a bad thing. We do need cortisol for like blood pressure regulation and really just homeostasis. But what happens is it goes on a wild rampage when hormones shift. So the way I describe cortisol is if you think about cortisol is like a lion in a cage, and estrogen and progesterone are like 2 security guards watching the lion. And so when something happens to them, they got to go deal with their personal stuff. So when they start to shift, when estrogen and progesterone shift, they got to go deal with their own personal stuff. So the lion's like, oh, there's no one guarding me. Well, I can just escape and do my own thing. And so when that's high during peri, it can do anything. It makes everything worse. So
Mm.
that's why regulating our nervous system is very, very important during perimenopause. Very important.
And
Can
how do you
if
recommend?
people,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry, just to say, if usually when people regulate it through like their regular therapy and they're been exposed to it for a long time, so they're familiar with those terms, like okay, regulate this, yes, this is how I do it, blah blah blah, whatever. But let's say someone is experiencing now and has never done therapy or hasn't been exposed to that world or isn't familiar with it. Would you recommend them taking actual like hormone therapy or things like that so they could catch up, and I don't know.
So that's up to them. I can't tell someone, I can't give medical advice, and I can't give advice on medications because it's not just out of my scope, but it's out of my license, my
Mm.
licensure. So the only time I can talk about medication is if there's like a nutrition implication, like, so for example, like statins, um, for cholesterol, that will lower COQ10. So I usually recommend people take COQ10 if they're on statins, especially
Oh,
in perimenopause, because that's going to make them feel very lethargic and fatigued. So I'll give people information if they want it, but usually I tell, if someone's interested in hormones, I'll tell them to find a hormone specialist who would be a physician specializing in hormones. Um, but there's so many like different ways to regulate our nervous system.
Well, give us some examples.
Well, I mean, I posted to my stories today about restorative yoga.
Mm.
Um, because it's more than like there's more than just meditation and yoga. Like my friend is a somatic coach. I cannot explain what she does because she's explained it to me and I'm just like, you're just so much better at explaining it. But like for me, I was chatting with a neurosomatic coach today, and she does like physical therapy, but for the nervous system. That's the best way that I can explain it. Because although I'm relaxed and I feel great mentally, my body's so used to being tense. And so my body's always tense.
Mm.
It's gotten a lot better, but because it's so tense, it it shifted over time, like my hips, which caused my spine to curve, which caused issues with my neck. It looks like I got hit by a truck.
Oh,
what?
jeez.
No, yeah, I got x-rays last year. I met an amazing chiropractor, and she was like, "Have you ever been in a car accident?" I'm like, "No." That's just stress. That's just years of stress. So my pain got so bad I had to get a bunch of adjustments last year, but the chiropractor's not fixing the problem because the problem is like deep inside my nervous system.
Yeah.
Because if
What?
my body's still tense, my spine and my skeleton's still going to shift, so it's not solving the problem.
What? Wait, you could stress out so much that you could physically look like you got in a car accident. That is wild to me.
So yeah, so I because I told the girl I was chatting with, I was like, I was born stressed because when my mom was pregnant with me and my brother's 2 years older than me, but my mom was in a very toxic, stressful environment, and that has a huge effect on baby. And so I was born stressed. And I told the girl today, I'm like, I've always been terrified of the world and like everything around me and everything and everyone. So I was very tense. And it wasn't until, because I'm 33 now, and it wasn't until I want to say maybe I was 26, did I realize my shoulders were literally like up here. And I was like, oh my God, how long have I been like that? But they still like it still tries to do this. And so because I just got out of fight or flight like last June.
Oh my God.
So
You really need
so
the float tank, may I say.
Yeah.
I'll have to like do a deep conditioner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh, we
yeah.
have caps too. I mean, they don't protect your hair completely, but I
Yeah,
do understand.
maybe because I've been seeing those and I'm like, will I feel claustrophobic in that? I don't know.
Julie got in there.
Yeah, it was great. It's great, but because that, the feeling of I'm gonna feel claustrophobic. It's again, you're not, it's forcing you to release everything. It's forcing you to just face all those thoughts, and then
Mhm.
so you might need. And I see it like how I see trauma when you go through trauma. Some people have like really long, dark, craziest, treacherous tunnels to get through of
Yeah.
your trauma. And I see it as a tunnel because you can't get over it, you can't go under it, you can't go around, you have to go through your tunnel. And some people have a smooth, clean, like well lit you know, a concrete poured tunnel, and they just,
There's torches
you know,
throughout.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But you know, Vanessa and I think you and I both grew up like that. We both, and for the listeners that can't see, when Vanessa's like, "Why are my shoulders like that?" Literally, they're so tight up to her ears, you know.
Yeah.
But like, I I also grew up, and I didn't realize, as you were saying, I was like, "Oh yeah," because
Mm-hmm.
when we finally when I finally got through my tunnel, person for me, I
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize my
Yeah.
shoulders were 5 feet high all the time.
Yeah.
You know, so like, and I was like, wait, and then the same question, how long have I been feeling
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And you don't know because you're numb to it. And then
Yeah.
as it goes back to your hormones have been at a certain state that your body's used to.
Mm-hmm.
So then, especially when you hit menopause, it drops. No? And then
Mm-hmm.
then the same thing, the amygdala goes like, ooh, and they send a
Yeah.
whole bunch of triggers.
Yeah,
Oh.
so the estrogen and progesterone will shift, and estrogen doesn't always drop for some women. It actually can dominate, but that can cause other problems like heavy periods and migraines. But the cortisol will increase, and the amount that the cortisol increases for differs for everybody. That's why everyone's symptoms are so different. And I tell people, like, stop comparing yourself to other people. Like, you're an individual, you got your own thing going on. But yeah, I mean, my cortisol was always so high, even at a young age. And I was always just scared and tense. And so, because my body was like that, now it's like, even though, like I said, I'm doing so much better mentally and emotionally, and I'm relaxed right now, my body still tries to tense
Mm.
because that's its norm and that's all it knows. And I'm like, stop it. You're fine and you're safe. Like, I have to keep telling myself, like, you're safe, you're fine, but you're safe. It's so crazy. So but yeah, from being so tense, because the muscles are in the muscles and the bones are so related and connected, it shifted. And I had and I thought I just had a neck problem because I had this sharp pain that it would cause me to cry. And I got x-rays from my PCP. But then he was like, "Oh, there's nothing you can do about that." I'm like, "You're so crazy. Of course there is." So then I met this one chiropractor. She did a full body scan. I remember she showed me, I was like, I had no idea my hips were like that, but that would make sense because when I would walk, I would feel off. And because everything shifted in my body, so my hips were rotated forward and then up. So my right hip is higher than my left. And because that happened, the right side of my spine, so the spine started curving on the right side here. And because that happened, my neck actually isn't, I think it's better now, but when she showed me, my neck's not straight forward. And yeah, it's like I'm like tilted, but it's like a small degree. I mean, you would really have to like stare at me. And I don't know how long my body was like I don't know where it started and what got worse because I've always been clumsy. But then the chiropractor's like, "No, your brain just doesn't know where you are in space. You're not clumsy." I was like, "Oh my God, that would make so much sense," because I would always trip over myself. I would always walk into things. When I was in, I think I was like first grade, I was just, I was on an escalator and just go, boop. I just fell backwards on an escalator. I'm like, what
What?
just happened? I remember just being like so confused. But I've always tripped over myself. And so when I got my hips adjusted, like every single part of my body adjusted last year, I stopped tripping over myself.
What?
And even my ribs were out of whack because I had, for the longest time, I would have this weird pain. It felt like something was stabbing me in the heart and it would just knock the breath out of me. And I remember when I was video chatting with my boyfriend, because I lived on the east coast of Florida at one point. I was chatting with him, just like, oh, I was like, ow, I gotta call you back. He's like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll call you back," because I couldn't breathe. And when I met this other chiropractor, she was just like, "Oh, that's just a rib, easy fix. Like everything was like an easy fix for her. And I'm like, I've been dealing with that pain my whole entire life, not understanding what it is. And I would go to the doctor. They're like, oh, you're fine. That just must be like heartburn or something. And it was my ribs were out of place.
What?
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I don't doubt it though, because I remember when cell phones first became super popular, my friend was having a bunch of neck pain and she went to the doctor and he was like, "Oh, you just have text neck." I'm like staring down at your phone at the text message.
Oh,
So, and I know I went to a doctor at one point and they were like, "You must turn your head to the right a lot." And I was like, "What?" How can you tell that? So if the way that you sit or the way that you look at your
Mhm.
phone or the way that you hold your neck can impact your scans, then why wouldn't years of tension and cortisol, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
So
met someone that specializes in posture, like rehabilitation, actually.
really,
I want to go see her too. I want to get my body like
yeah,
at a point where I feel
yeah.
great.
But my other question is, okay, so you go to chiropractor, right? But you know how your bones and your muscle have muscle memory of all the trauma.
Mhm.
So it's pushing you, let's say going back to your neck thing, it's pushing you slightly to the right, and then you go to chiropractor, it adjusts it. But then
Mhm.
if you don't face the stress or the trauma or the
Right.
hormone, then it'll just continue going right and right and right. And then you go
Right.
to you get corrected, but it just keeps going. So instead of going to a chiropractor more, you have to just address your stress.
So the last time I went to the chiropractor was before I moved in November,
Oh,
actually. So, um, I am going to start seeing this neurosomatic coach probably in June. Um, so she works more like deeper into the actual muscular system and the nervous system.
so
So
she's
like
like coaching you on how to relax your body.
that and like yeah, and getting like down to the root cause.
I know there's like a whole bunch of um little things that people can do to regulate their nervous system, and they can be like roll your eyes this way, take a deep breath when you look up, like little,
Mm-hmm.
I say little things meaning like, you know, taking a deep breath. um so I'm assuming then that that's the kind of thing that you guys would be doing, or
I'm
you
not
may not know
sure
because you haven't
the
done
way
it.
yeah, the way that she kind of explained it seemed more like physical like a different type of physical therapy. That's how I'm thinking about it in
Oh
my head. But we'll see. I'll let you know when I start
yeah, I'm
going.
really interested.
Yeah. But yeah, I
um
mean there's tapping,
oh
there's
yeah.
I know like my friend who's the other coach showed me I think it was like doing a self hug, like a
Oh,
self hug type of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
how you do
Julia.
it? Wait, how
Yeah,
we?
like a self hug. And I know she said like rubbing behind the ears like stimulates the vagus
yes,
nerve and stuff
yes.
like that. So there's just so many different things. And my friend's an acupuncturist and she talks about how she regulates the chi in the body and there's so many things. And I just tell people like find what works for you and what you're open to doing. That's why I like to invite people on to my Instagram and do lives with them, so people can spread their knowledge.
um Funny you said that. I saw somebody today who was telling me that her anxiety's been up. And she's like, you know how some people get massages and feel better? She's like, I gotta find something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and massages. Yeah, there's so many different things.
Yeah, she said she
So,
doesn't like massages. She was like, that's not gonna relax me. Which is funny because I have heard a lot of people say that too, where they don't like to be touched, or they just,
hmm
one client told me she's very ticklish.
Could you imagine feeling you're being tickled for an hour? Like,
That sounds terrible. But yeah,
yeah.
so
so
Vanessa, how did you figure out that it was your spine? Or like, how did you figure out one day you said, I'm gonna go to a chiropractor? This has been hurting a lot.
So I go to a lot of networking events, and I was actually speaking at a networking event one time. And I stood there before I talked and I said, hey, my spine is curving. Who can help me?
Ah!
Because I was in so much pain, and I didn't want to just be like those people that just deal with their pain, like my
Mhm.
mom. So I love my mom, but she's never going to do anything about her pain. So what happened is back in 2022, I had a really sharp pain in my neck. And I actually couldn't go to the doctor because that's when we had on the other side, there was like a hurricane. And I was like, oh my God. And so my PCP ordered for me to get x-rays, but it was just here and the thoracic cavity, which is like the chest area. And so when I saw that my spine started curving in the x-rays, I was like, oh my goodness. Because it felt the way it's a lot better now, but the way that I described it last year to my doctor friends is I said it felt like there was an alien baby trying to burst through my back. That's
Wow.
how uncomfortable I was. And it just like horrific. And so the first chiropractor, although she took the full x-ray, she actually couldn't help me. And then I met another chiropractor that was like just night and day to the first one. And she showed me this activator tool, which I call like a mini pogo stick. And she uses that to do gentle adjustments. And I met some other chiropractors here at Neuroplasticity St. Pete off of MLK. They also use the same tools, but actually a lot more, and they have a lot more gadgets, and they actually specialize in concussions and like migraines and headaches and the more of the up here was that the neck more
The
of
L,
like
I think that's the L4. No,
so like the C's and stuff like that. So the only thing I'm doing right now is this. My chiropractor told me to put like a block under this. It's like a special block that I have to lay my neck on because apparently our neck is supposed to have a 45-degree angle. And
45 degrees?
it's a 45, it's supposed to have a 45-degree angle, and my neck is, well, I don't, it's probably a lot better now, but at the time it was straight like a pencil. And she's like, that's not supposed to be like that. That's really bad.
Oh,
That reminds I had a really close friend. He had to do he was getting a lot of neck pain, shoulder pain. He was going to massages and he said no matter what I did, it wasn't working. Then finally he because he was in finance, he was working like 18 hours, sleeping under his desk, doing all this stuff. And it was one of the biggest deals that he had to close of his life, right? So he's like, oh my God, if I make this, it's really gonna change my life. Did it? So all that pressure, right? Everything I'm wearing, and then people expecting him to either fail or succeed, and they're like, oh, so he was freaking out so much. Then finally he went to a chiropractor at some point, and then the chiropractor's like, man, your neck is I've never seen such a straight neck before. And no one, most people didn't know this, or at least I didn't. I went, oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because
I know, no, I learned so much about the skeleton last year. I had no idea that we weren't supposed to have straight necks. I was like, what?
always say stand up straight. So I was like, oh, then you have a straight neck, you have good posture.
Right.
But knowing that you're supposed to have 45 degrees moving back, no?
Mm-hmm.
No one does that nowadays. Like people are the text necks, right? They're doing 45 the opposite. They're going forward.
Yeah.
yeah, we can't put our necks back.
It's
Kind
because
of
if you Google it, I was like, oh, I didn't know that was supposed to be normal. So I was like, what? So yeah, I'm like pretty much forcing the curve back in my neck
Wow.
with this little I can show you. It's this little
It's called traction, or what is it called?
Yes.
Tractor, or I don't know. I looked it up.
Yeah, it's this thing.
Oh, there's your block.
Yeah.
It's a big block. It's a big yoga block.
It does look like one.
So yeah, she told me I've been actually bad with this because she told me back in like when did I first start seeing her? Oh, I think I started seeing her in I think August maybe, and she's like, you need to do this every day for 15 minutes for 9 months. I was like, excuse me? I was like, you want me to do what now?
Mm, that's a lot of
And
work right there.
yeah, so I stopped like in February because I was just like so over it. But then I started to feel the pain again. And so I'm like,
That'll
oh, I guess
motivate
I'll
you.
start doing block.
So
Was
how soon were you using that and how soon did the pain go away?
So that wasn't really the like she did so many adjustments that corrected the pain. It was just she couldn't put the curve back in my neck. I had to do that myself.
mm,
Oh.
Yeah.
interesting.
So yeah.
So you specialize in nutrition.
Hmm.
So how does that tie into managing symptoms? Does it help the nervous system, hurt the nervous system? What is the skinny on that?
So I will touch up on how like what foods can increase the cortisol, which would be caffeine, sugar, alcohol. But I tell people like the effects
Stuff.
of those like of alcohol, sugar, and caffeine is different for everybody. And so when I work with people is I will look at their lifestyle, like every little nook and cranny of their health and their lifestyle, including like if they're having a hard time sleeping, if they're waking up in the middle of the night, um, and also like their work as well, like what they're doing for work. Do they get breaks? It's like my one client, she has a very stressful job where she's not flexible at all, like at all. So, and her job is like 75% of her time
Mm,
Mm.
as well.
we might be
So,
able to relate to that, Julie.
Yeah, it's been a little bit stressful over here.
we kind of what I do, I don't like remove. I focus more on adding what the body needs, not so much removing things because um I always post to my stories like my cheat days. I love my cheat days. I've been having cheat days for like 13 years now and I'm never going to stop because I love food. So I talk more about how we can add more nutrients, not so much telling somebody, oh, you have to stop drinking coffee. Like people love coffee. I'm not going to tell them to stop drinking coffee. So um what I do is I make suggestions and like I'll make recommendations and based off of my client's life and preferences and we'll discuss it and if they approve it or not then we move forward and make goals. So for example, I never told my one client like, hey, don't put honey in your tea, or because her husband's like, oh, you shouldn't put honey in your tea because it's extra sugar. I'm like, I'm not looking at that. Like, I'm looking at how we can add more nutrients throughout the day. Because I eat
Mm.
dark chocolate like every other night. I love dark chocolate. And I always emphasize actually how chocolate can actually help women in perimenopause because it actually has chemicals that are really good for our brain. And like I don't want my clients to stop enjoying the foods that they like because then that would make them sad and kind of defeat the purpose of being happy because I want my clients to be happy and be able to live their life to the fullest and enjoy life. I don't want them to be miserable. So a lot of people think meeting with the dietitian is me telling them, oh, you can't have this, you can't have that. And that's not it at all. At all.
Relief.
It's, huh?
I said, that's a relief. I guess I will have some dark chocolate.
Yeah, it's funny. My client and I were actually talking about where we can find this specific brand of dark chocolate that I haven't had in months. And I finally found it at Whole Foods. And she showed me, she's like, oh, I got it at Whole Foods. I'm so happy they had it. And it's so good. But we talk more about how she can add nutrients and nutrient dense food into her busy lifestyle. So she has more energy and can grow her hair back because she had some hair loss. And so she can sleep better.
I do like that way of thinking towards nutritionists versus maybe the traditional way or maybe the popular way of thinking. It's kind of, oh, is she the food police? She's gonna tell you to do the you know, versus like, no, why don't you stick to what you have, but why don't we just add things that are gonna be better on top of that? And then eventually when they see a pot, okay, if you're losing hair, I would be like, I'll eat anything. Give me whatever it takes. I'm all pot. So if it takes eating, you know, handfuls of kale, which I love anyway, but if it takes
Yeah, that's cheating, Julie.
then
You already eat all that kale.
I love kale. I don't know why it's not popular. Come on. But if it really took me like handfuls of eating something that I didn't like, to do, and I actually saw changes, I would probably reframe my thought of eating that. I'd be like, oh, that makes my hair grow. Cool. You know, then you and then you're so full that you might not make room for the stuff that you're used to eating, like burgers and French fries and blah, 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 right? Is that the kind of idea that you're thinking about?
Well, I never tell somebody to do something they don't want to do. And I don't believe in eating foods somebody doesn't like because there's always another source. So, for example, I absolutely hate bananas. You can't get me to eat bananas. I don't like the smell. I don't like how they look. I don't like the texture. I don't like anything about them. So I get my potassium from potatoes, tomatoes, spinach, and avocados. You know, there's other sources of that nutrient. So I ask, it's like I said, it's a full dive into my client. So it's like, hey, what foods do you not like and why? Because some people, it might be, oh, well, I don't know how to cook that food, or I had a bad experience, or, you know, it's a texture thing. I need to know the why behind it. I like to also base my recommendations off of somebody's preference. So it's like, okay, if you love kale, Julie, how else can we incorporate kale into other things? And are you willing to try other dark greens or other sources? Because kale is not the only, you know, vegetable that you can eat, just as an example. But yeah, it's not limiting somebody. It's funny that you say the food police, because I made a post last week about how we're not food police, and it actually has a picture of ice cream on the front. And we want you to enjoy your food, because I can't tell you the amount of times people have, it is like the weirdest thing. Thursday I went to this networking event and I was talking to this lady, and she was eating a burger and fries, and she was trying to cover up her burger and fries for me. She's like, I promise I usually eat well. I do. And I'm like, I don't have handcuffs in my bag. Like, what do you, but the amount of times people have done that to me is so weird. And I said to her, I was like, girl, I'm eating pizza and chocolate chip cookies this week. Like, I'm a human being just like you. But yeah, I will never forget this one time. I think it was like 2022. I went to this networking event, and we all met at Olive Garden. And I sat down with a group of women, and they asked me what I did, and I told them. And they look at me and say, "Oh, you're probably judging us right now, aren't you, with what our food we eat?" And I was so shocked. I was like, no. And then they look at each other and they're like, oh, she's totally judging us right now. Like, these were like grown ass women in their 40s. And I'm like, what am I, in high school right now?
That would be a thought in my head, at least.
Oh my goodness.
Don't watch me eat dessert right now.
It was so weird. And people always do that. They're like, oh, I promise I usually eat good. And I'm like, okay, like, and like, it's so weird.
Do you think that's just obviously it's their trigger? Because, you know, Alicia says your reaction was like, oh my God, you would have felt like that too. My reaction, I was like, hey, is this good? Is this blah, 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 blah. I would be more intrigued, like asking you more things, because food has never been a trigger for me. Like, if you give me cardboard, aka, you know, kale, I can eat raw kale. If someone gave me just literally a bag of kale and said, this is your dinner, I'll be like, cool, whatever. Nah, 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 nah. I don't care about food. Like, food is not my thing. So I wonder if that's just not a trigger for me. So that's why you as a nutritionist doesn't trigger me. Like, you're not a police to me.
Mhm.
You're just, it's just, I see you as a dictionary of things. So I would be like,
Mhm.
hey, this frees me. Should I be doing this? I eat a lot of this. Is that true that this is a nightshade? You know?
I'd rather have that than people assuming I'm judging them, because I feel like they're judging me thinking I'm judging them.
Ooh,
And I'm like,
dang, how about that one?
yeah, and I'm like, then it makes me so uncomfortable when people do that, because I feel like people think dietitians are born like eating a certain way. And I have to explain to people, I'm like, listen, it took me 2 years to drink plain water. I was addicted to cherry Coke and vanilla Coke, and all I ate was pizza and like cookies and cupcakes at one point. Like when I was a teenager, I'm like, I was not born eating vegetables 5 times a day like I do now. I mean, I ate like a vegetable a week at one point. And when I say
Well,
that, they're like, oh, yeah, I guess so.
it really took you 2 years to train yourself to drink just plain water?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
What was the transition like?
It was so hard because I had a really severe sugar addiction. Like people like, oh, I had a craving. I'm like, that's not a craving. Like a craving is like, you feel like you're going to die if you don't have something. So,
What?
there's different reasons for sugar, like intense sugar cravings. It can be a mineral deficiency and or a serotonin issue. So when people are depressed or sad, their serotonin is going to be naturally lower. And when our serotonin is low, that can trigger a sugar craving, because sugar will temporarily increase our serotonin. Now, magnesium is one of the ingredients to make serotonin. So typically, so what happened is when I started eating more vegetables and just fruits and food, not junk food, the cravings went away because I was giving my body what it needed. So it could be a magnesium or serotonin issue, because if the magnesium is low, the serotonin can also be low. But if the magnesium isn't low, it could be a chromium issue or a selenium issue, which are all minerals. But
Hmm,
typically it's magnesium.
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, 50% of Americans don't get enough magnesium to begin with, but that like craving fluctuates a lot for people. I mean, even if they have it, some people don't at all. But I had such an intense sugar craving that all I wanted was cherry Coke, vanilla Coke, and V8 Splash
Oh
and
God,
cupcakes,
V8 Splash.
brownies and cake and ice cream. Like I remember I would go out to Sonic at like midnight and get the Sonic blasts, and I would just sit in my car like like eating
Now
them.
hold on a second. Didn't you say you also couldn't keep weight on?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to Sonic at 3 o'clock in the morning and not
Midnight.
gaining weight?
No, some people, when their cortisol so high, so what happens is when the cortisol goes up, blood sugar goes up. Now, whatever your body wants to do with that blood sugar is really up to your body. So some people gain weight and some people can actually lose weight. So I was actually always starving and always hungry. And a lot of people, wow, you're so lucky. I'm like, it's actually not fun at all to always feel dizzy and
Hmm,
to get dizzy driving. So I'm like, no,
wow.
actually, it's not fun to always feel starving all the time and not being able to eat when you want to eat because you're working or you're out and about.
I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's why I always tell people, like, don't, like, please don't, just because someone's small, you have no idea what they went through. Because people think, oh, well, you're small, why are you watching what you eat? Like the amount of people that say that to me is crazy.
Wow.
I'm like,
I
weight has
try to tell
nothing
my
to do with.
clients, if you want to work out for your heart health and your
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
circulation, like
Yeah.
do it for your health. Don't do it with the goal of losing weight, because number
Yeah.
one, I feel like people get frustrated anyways, like, oh, the weight's not coming off as fast as I wanted it to, so forget it, I just won't work out. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, I think we might be working out for the wrong reason here.
Yeah, I told my friend that too. I was like, why don't you focus on working out for your mental health and like your sleep, like the way you feel, not what the scale says, because you're gonna drive yourself crazy.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's just, I mean, when people say that to me, it just really goes to show how little they understand about the human body. Because I'm like, um, I eat the way I eat for my heart and my liver and my kidneys and my brain. And so I can sleep well. Like, what? So yeah, people are just very interesting.
Oh, yeah. So those other minerals you were talking about, how do
Hmm.
you get those minerals?
So, chromium is actually like if someone likes broccoli, actually a cup of cooked broccoli actually gives all 22 milligrams of chromium that we need in the day. And also, I always emphasize a multivitamin. And I was actually just thinking, I don't know where the hell my multivitamin is. It's still stuck in Tampa for some reason. I should have had it like 2 days ago. Like, where's my vitamins and my chromium, my minerals? Um, so I've never had that happen. So annoying. But and then selenium is, I would say, is in a variety of vegetables and also in nuts as well, like walnuts, Brazil nuts, cashews, almonds. But it's in, the minerals are in most vegetables. So that's why when I've had clients who have like severe sugar cravings, it's like, hey, let's just eat more vegetables and you'll feel better.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
That is not what I would have guessed.
Yeah. So when I worked with pregnant women, and they would have severe cravings, it's like your baby is pulling nutrients. So it's like you need more magnesium, you need more chromium, you need more of everything. So that's why the sugar cravings happen. And then
Oh,
the hormones are changing the brain, so the serotonin gets affected as well.
you are a huge book of knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really help me so much. People sometimes I lose people, so I gotta like be careful what I'm saying. So like, what?
It's fantastic.
Okay, so that I guess that makes a lot of sense, like as far as PTSD and honestly the sugar thing even makes sense to me because I feel like I always think about sugar cravings being similar to drug cravings in
Yeah,
the sense that, it's almost like an obsessive compulsive type thing where like I'm thinking about this thing that I want and I can't
yeah.
stop thinking about it until I get it.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, sugar is a stimulant, technically. So, yeah. And I remember actually doing a bunch of research on the relate how high fructose corn syrup in rats, like the rats, I can't remember what it was. It was years ago. I did this in college and I did a lot of research on like there was a study with rats and like they were given cocaine and then like they were given high fructose corn syrup and they preferred the high fructose corn syrup over the cocaine. And I was like, what
less
the
of a
hell?
hangover. It's less of a hangover with corn.
Maybe, I don't know. Uh,
Um,
but how do people get to know you more? Like, how do they reach out to you? Where would they find you?
Instagram is the best place. Facebook is the worst. People will try to contact me on Facebook. Please don't contact me on Facebook because I'm not active on there. Like I have a profile, but I'm just on there for the groups. So Instagram is the best. I post my stories every day and then I post like I'll make reels or posts like 3 to 4 times a week, but I'm always chatting with people on Instagram. Um, and
and
I mean they can always text or email me too.
What's your handle?
It's menopause.prep. It's actually you'll see my logo. So it's a white background and a black and pink menopause prep.
Very
awesome.
cool.
Well, any other burning questions, Julie? She's the question machine over there.
I know. It's so great to just because like without a beat, you're like, oh, Da-da-da-da. Oh,
No.
oh my God.
I mean,
This
just nutrition though. Don't ask me. Like, I make people laugh because people are like, wow, you're so smart. I'm like, don't ask me where any state or country is because I
Yeah.
don't know. I just know where Florida is, where Hawaii, California, and like Washington. Like, I had to look up where Connecticut was because like I had a friend, my client like from Connecticut. I'm like, I don't know where that is. Like going to Ohio in July. I'm like, where is even Ohio? Like,
I just
that's
know
what
vicinities. I couldn't tell you like exactly what's around.
I thought New Zealand was in Europe for years. Like I really did. I was like, wait, it's not in Europe. Like I'm one of those people. Like if someone, you know, those YouTube videos where people like stop random people and they're like, hey, name a president, name it, you know, I would be
Yeah.
like, like, can you ask me a nutrition question? A science question?
And then 2 seconds later, you're on a panel talking about this and all this science experiments, and everyone's like, "Oh, wow, where's New Zealand?"
Uh,
Uh-oh.
you got the wrong one.
Yeah.
That's
Great, thank you
awesome.
for sharing today, and I can't wait. I really would love you back because I feel like nutrition and therapy and mental health are so
Mhm.
well connected. It's just a great reminder for
Mhm.
everybody. Like you have to take care of your inside as much
Yeah.
as you take care of the outside.
Yeah.
Well, and
And
I
I
really
think
like.
Alicia and I are gonna do a live, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh,
Yeah, I'm not sure when. I gotta figure that out. But I guess because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I guess it would be good to do it this month.
That sounds good to me.
So,
I also like the way that you linked in like all of the different parts of the body. We talked about the nervous system, the hormones, the endocrine system, like it all's working together with mental health, physical health. It's
mhm.
all so intertwined. So I love that that background knowledge that you have on that as well. So anyway, well, thank you so much for joining us today, and
Thank you.
hopefully we'll see you back soon, and we'll let everybody on Instagram know when we're going to do our live.
Yes.
I'm gonna be walking out of here 45 degrees back of my neck,
No.
right? It just feels so weird like that. Like this
Well, you
angle is
might, you don't,
weird.
honestly, like the only way you can tell is like by a physical assessment. Because like
Oh.
because to me, I don't know, like when she was telling me, I was like, your neck looks straight. Like everyone's neck looks straight
Yeah.
because like the muscle is, makes it look straight, but it's, if you think
Oh.
about it, it's the actual bone part. If you
Oh.
Google it, yeah, you can, if you Google it, it'd probably be better to get a visual of what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah, that's true because you have muscle on top of your
Yeah.
spine, right? Top of your back and everything. So you don't see all that. You don't actually see where the bone is curving.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay. Heading to a chiropractor right now.
All
Well,
right,
thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Have
Have
a
a good
great
one.
night.